Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East update. It's the week of September 4th. Lots going on. Let's jump into it right away. Sort of our news bites. Again, just as a reminder, to get the full benefit of this Middle East update, you need to go to our website at holygroundexplorations.com to access the PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this YouTube. So with that in mind, grab it. You'll see the photos. There are times I can't get to all the different articles and I allude to that, but this is our News Bites section. A top Palestinian official has reiterated his belief that acts of terrorism constitute a legitimate response to the recent normalization deal between the Jewish state and the United Arab Emirates. We've had a couple knifings. We've had the death of a rabbi, all in the hands of Palestinians. And when information like this is sent out by officials, it stirs things up and the blame has to go back to Fatah, to the Palestinians. Another news bite, major U.S. Jewish groups are calling for Twitter to take action against the Ayatollah of Iran. We have an article on this later, but the anti-Semitic social media outbursts are getting out of control, and you have to wonder, who's filtering any of this? What the anti-Semitism that goes on in both Facebook as well as Twitter, and let's not underestimate the power of social media. And so more to come regarding this situation. And then Hamas, our good friends, a so-called peaceful organization, not hardly. The Hamas terrorist deputy chief has given Israel 2 months, a 2-month window in order to implement the conditions of the latest so-called ceasefire. How many of you think that that's going to last very long? Anyhow, the warning from Kahil al-Hayya is that Gaza-based terrorists are prepared now to enter into a, quote, confrontational campaign, even if it will lead to the bombing of Tel Aviv. So all these balloons and rockets that are launched more or less to the east of Gaza, landing many times just out in the open fields of the Negev or Sderot, places such as that. The threat now is that we're going to focus our attention and send our bombs into the population centers of Tel Aviv. So we'll wait and see what transpires regarding that, because the next major articles we're going to read about or talk about the Syrian airstrikes, both one that happened on Monday and one that happened on Wednesday. The first that happened on Monday, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that Monday night, 10 combatants were killed in Israeli airstrikes near the Syrian capital of Damascus. Of those 10 that were killed, 7 were non-Syria militias, but loyal to Hezbollah and the Iranians. The raids resulted in the destruction of Lebanese Hezbollah weapons and ammunition headquarters belonging to the Lebanese Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So we'll see what happens, and you think that the foot on the gas pedal might ease up, but as I said on Wednesday night, again, I call this Syria airstrikes 2, a presumed, because remember the IDF doesn't usually comment on any reported strikes, but a presumed Israeli airstrike killed 16 Iranian-backed fighters in eastern Syria late Wednesday. A Syrian opposition-linked group said, and they went on to talk about it. Actually, the rockets were launched from an air base in Palmyra, which is more in central eastern Syria. And so once again, things seem to be ratcheting up, and we're looking for the response of both Iran. And remember, Iran usually uses its proxies, whether it's Islamic Jihad or Hamas or Hezbollah. So we'll wait to see the retaliations of those and how this continues to move forward. This whole normalization, it's hard for us to understand the significance of this. We look at Jordan, we look at Egypt, and we know that those are the two long-standing peace agreements, peace treaties in this day. But the fact that the United Arab Emirates has entered into this normalization, many are saying it's just the first of many dominoes to fall. But then you kind of have to wade through the rhetoric, whether it's Bahrain or Oman or the Saudis, and there's still, the rhetoric is still, we will enter into this normalization when there's a two-state solution, et cetera, et cetera. But behind the scenes, we're seeing things like Saudi Arabia announcing on Wednesday that it's now allowing all countries to use its airspace for flights to and from the United Arab Emirates. This literally means that the boycott, the long-standing boycott to and from Israel flying over the Gulf state has now been lifted. Netanyahu came out and saying the Saudi move will not only cheapen flights for us, it'll shorten the time, and it will develop tremendous tourism and a major asset to our economy. This is a big deal. So the Saudi airspace is now open. Now, as I mentioned about Khamenei, we said, the Twitter thing. Here's the nuts and bolts of that. The Israeli Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, is again under fire from Jewish groups regarding disseminating anti-Semitic, if not a nihilistic, rhetoric on social media. In a widely planted tweet, Khamenei denounced the recent Israel-United Arab Emirates Pact as, quote, cruelty against the interests of the world of Islam, and blamed, quote, the filthy Zionist agents of the U.S., such as the Jewish member of the Trump family, singling out who? Of course, that's Jared Kushner. He goes on, he's been slammed in the past in Twitter for talking about Israel as a deadly cancerous growth that must be uprooted and destroyed. And earlier this year, he shared a poster that called for, here's the words, a final solution. The term that was used by Hitler, by the Nazis, for the systematic slaughter of the 6 million Jews during World War II. This is what's going on. And not to this date, no one has pulled the plug. Twitter, Facebook, etc. Well, let's talk about COVID. Got to, right? Even though in Israel today, there are more cases than ever, it seems as if researchers are actually optimistic. It's called herd immunity. They actually believe that in weeks to come, literally weeks, that the coronavirus infection rate will start dropping dramatically. This herd immunity occurs when a high enough percentage of the population has already contracted a disease and recovered from it, giving them enough antibodies in their system so that the rate of new infections dramatically drops as more and more people gain this immunity. And so even though it's how you want to interpret the data, but we know that Israel is concerned about the high holidays of the transmission of the virus, and yet the experts are saying we can expect a dramatic decline. Holy ground, you'll see at the very end that we do advertise our 2021 tours. We did postpone 3 tours this fall, and we've rescheduled them for the February spring of 2021. So check that out. We're planning on going. Don't miss out. You want to go to Israel. Believe me, it'll change your life. Well, I see I'm running out of time. You can read about the Israeli new face mask. It's put out by a company called Sonomast. And basically, their spiel is simply this, that this face mask is not just a mask, it's a COVID killer. And so it's got some sort of antimicrobial technology that's not only does the face mask thing, but it neutralizes and destroys the bacteria and fungi on contact. So check that out. More to come. I'm going to go over this lightly, but it's a very serious issue. Vaccinations. Virginia forced vaccination. We just read this. It created quite the stir on social media. But Dr. Barrows in Virginia predicted that concerning mandatory vaccinations, that the government wouldn't be able to force its way into private homes. But listen to this and tell me if this sounds a little end-time-ish to you. He says, but if you want to go to a sporting event, if you want to go to a restaurant, if you want to go into the public place, you're going to have to show proof of a vaccination. And so basically you will be excluded until you can prove that you've been vaccinated. Interesting. There's an article here on end times issues that's very troubling to see the drop in so-called evangelicals that will no longer believe. They think that Jesus was a great teacher, but nothing more. I'm talking evangelicals, and that the latest survey indicates that a whooping 30% of all evangelicals now believe that Jesus was not God. Is this the last days? Is this the chilling or the coldness of the heart surfacing? I think so. Christology, as you know, is a big deal. Who's Jesus? Just a great teacher? No. Son of God, the great I am. Well, and then last up, our dear friend Amir Zafardi is issued a warning. Many of you know Amir. You know that he's a friend of the ministry. And so this was posted on his Facebook. I wanted to share it with you about, many of you like me might be news junkies, especially from Israel, but keep in mind the biased media. This is specifically dealing with a basically anti-American propaganda. The iNews 24, our Israeli News Live. So check that out, read that article. So with that, out of time this week, God bless, and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And just know that no matter what it looks like on this landscape, even as it gets darker and darker outside, God is in control. Amen. Shalom.